Look, it's likely going to be in the thousands. It's a very good question, and that's something that the Office of Management and Budget and the entire team at the White House here, again, is unfortunately having to work on today. These discussions and these conversations, these meetings would not be happening if the Democrats had voted to keep the government open. Steve, go ahead. Look, I'll let the president speak on that. As you know, he has made it very clear he wants this war to end, but he has also said if both sides aren't serious about ending the war, the United States of America will continue to sell weapons to NATO, and NATO can use those weapons however they want with respect to Ukraine.
Office of Management and Budget, OMB, Chief Russell Vought and President Donald Trump are in the midst of mapping out cuts to the federal government after lawmakers on Capitol Hill failed to reach a funding bill agreement early Wednesday morning. Trump set the stage in the lead-up to the shutdown that the federal government is likely to see staffing and program cuts during the shutdown, adding in a message Thursday to Truth Social that many federal agencies are a political scam. I have a meeting today with Russ Vought, he of Project 2025 fame, to determine which of the many Democrat agencies, most of which are a political scam, he recommends to be cut, and whether or not those cuts will be temporary or permanent, Trump posted. I can't believe the radical left Democrats gave me this unprecedented opportunity. They are not stupid people, so maybe this is their way of wanting to, quietly and quickly, make America great again. Fox News spoke with Richard Stern, the Heritage Foundation's director of the Grover M. Herman Center for the Federal Budget, Thursday morning to discuss which agencies the OMB chief would likely target for staffing cuts, and if such cuts would be permanent. Stern explained to Fox Digital that there are a pair of overlapping issues that lead to the government's staffing size. Agencies are required by various laws to provide certain services to citizens. And, separately, appropriation bills set funding floors on how much money an agency has available to spend on staff payroll. During a shutdown, however, there is a lapse in funding, meaning agencies do not have payroll floors from the funding bill, leaving the executive branch with discretion on how to continue providing required services to citizens, he explained. Because the funding bills set effective floors per salary spending, that tends to dictate how many people work for the agencies. In the event of a shutdown, the only requirement on the administration is to ensure that the agencies provide the services and whatnot that are required by law. But those laws don't say you need, 100 staffers to write a grant or only one staffer, Stern told Fox Digital in a phone interview. They simply say, there's a grant program that has to go out the door under XYZ parameters. So, in the event of a lapse in funding, it means that the administration can lay out a plan saying, hey, look, we think the Department of Education, for example, could do everything it is legally required to do. But do it with 10% of the workforce, he continued. If the administration determines that an agency can fulfill its legally required services to citizens with fewer people, it will subsequently send reduction in force notices, known as RIFs, to staffers. If the funding was there, and if the funding law required those staff levels, then you wouldn't be able to RIF, he said. But in the lapse of funding, it gives the White House that opportunity. Permanent changes to the government are in a gray zone, however, because RIFs would not be able to take effect until after 60 days. Once the RIF notices go out, you legally need to wait 60 days before the RIF notices can be enacted, Stern continued. Really, the shutdown would have to last 60 days beyond that to actually act on the RIFs. The Heritage Foundation expert, who also serves as the conservative think tank's acting director of the Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies, stressed that any staffing cuts are not an example of government downsizing. It's not downsizing the activities of agencies, he said. It's not reducing what they make available, what services they provide. It's simply reducing the workforce that's providing the same level and the same amount of services. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told a gaggle of reporters Thursday that thousands of federal employees could be laid off during the shutdown. Look, it's likely going to be in the thousands. It's a very good question. And that's something that the Office of Management and Budget and the entire team at the White House here, again, is unfortunately having to work on today, Leavitt said. Stern pointed to a handful of agencies that will likely be targeted for layoffs, citing agencies that have mission creeped their original purview into regulatory issues such as the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as other agencies, like the National Science Foundation, that handle grant writing for programs. Probably the Department of Ed is is kind of the poster child on this one, he said. They've been talking about they quite literally only need 10% or so on the staff.
Senator Mark Wayne Mullin, sir, thank you for your time. I want to take you to MSNBC on Wednesday. Here's Elizabeth Warren talking about the dire straits that Republicans are putting Americans in right now. Watch here.
There are going to be people who are going to have to make decisions about whether to make rent or pay for health insurance. There are going to be people who are just going to let their health insurance go. Mm-hmm. There are going to be people who are going to die because of these decisions.
So, Senator, I'll allow you to respond to that. Americans will die because of the decisions you're making in Washington.
Bill, sometimes you just can't make sense out of crazy. I mean, how many times they pulled that fire alarm? Remember, OBB was going to kill thousands, and thousands were going to lose their health care, and hundreds of rural hospitals were going to go out. I mean, they cry this ridiculous war cry, rally cry that does nothing. They continue to lie to the American people because they can't actually fight on substance. They can't fight on facts. What they know for a fact is they have voted for this CR 13 times. In fact, they voted for this clean CR 13 times underneath Biden. They voted for this exact clean CR, this exact language, exact numbers. A year ago, they voted on it in December, they voted on it in January, and they voted on it in March. And now they're saying that they're going to hold the American people hostage unless they get $1.5 trillion to defund basically everything that Obamacare ripped, or not Obamacare, but one big beautiful bill pulled out of the fraud, waste, and abuse, and they're saying now they want to put it back in. It's a really hard argument to make. And by the way, what they're wanting $1.5 trillion for, which is $600 billion above the defense budget, is only to open the government up for 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. It's very hard for them to explain. So instead of actually arguing about facts, Dana, what they do is they go out there and they make ridiculous claims like this. And at some point you have to ignore them because Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, they've lost their ever-loving mind. And they're just saying the most ridiculous things possible because they're pandering to this extreme left.
And sometimes when you're in the middle of a fight, it's harder to pull up out of it and look more broadly. But National Review said this about the Democrats, saying that Democrats' cynical shutdown strategy, that they can use the conflict to energize their demoralized base heading into an election year. But there's also a risk that this will backfire, given that they will almost certainly have to cave and agree to fund the government eventually. All their tough talk now will only reinforce the sense of disillusionment among their base. I imagine that's how it will ultimately go. And I wonder how many of these Democrats are thinking that Chuck Schumer's political future is more important than the overall goals that they want to reach as a party or for the country.
Danny, you're absolutely right. This has all happened because the Schumer shutdown, because he's fearful of AOC running against him in 2028. If the Democrats are really concerned, they could open the government up in 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes. We already have a bipartisan bill that 3 Democrats have voted for. We just need 5 more of them to join with us, and we can open the government up. Literally, we could open it up immediately.
Senator, on that point then, apparently yesterday I had at least a dozen senators, some report up at 20 senators, talking in the well of the Senate about negotiations. You're in the Senate. Did you see that? Did you hear that? Did you see that as a possibility of breaking the ice here?
Well, where do you negotiate? Yes, I did see that. We have had a group working for about 3 days, meeting yesterday. We met at 6 o'clock in the morning. The day before that, we met at 6 o'clock in the morning. We met at 8 o'clock at night. And what the deal is now, it isn't, we're not negotiating on trying to reopen the government. We've already said this is a clean CR. You can vote to open it right now, and we'll negotiate on what the long-term funding bill is, and we'll talk to you about it. But we're not going to allow you to hold the American people hostage because of your political fears. What we have to do is make sure that we continue to move forward. And I think I kind of agree with Vice President J.D. Vance. I think at some point this isn't going to be that long because they're going to cave in. What Russ Vought did yesterday is he went ahead and paid the military in full. Today, he went ahead and paid all federal employees in full. Now, mind you, he didn't have to do that. The White House didn't have to do that because effectively we went to a shutdown on 12:01 yesterday morning. But he went ahead and chose to do that. Now, he runs out of money, and he can't do that on the 15th and on the 16th. So on the 15th and 16th, the Democrats are going to have to choose, are they going to continue this political fight for Chuck Schumer to be, because of his fear of AOC, or are they going to decide to go ahead and pay the military and pay the federal employees? I think their spirits will break at that point and say Chuck Schumer is not leading for the American people, but leading for his political agenda.
Can I just get a quick comment from you on something? Maybe this is something for a longer discussion later, but healthcare costs are an issue. People keep talking about it. Obamacare didn't solve it. And now we are in this situation where they think that these temporary COVID-era extensions, they want to have them permanent forever. Do you think it's time for the Republicans to think about figuring out a way to get back to some free market principles, or at least some plain talk about just how expensive healthcare actually is?
Well, we know Obamacare, affordable health care, didn't work because it made the health care prices go through the roof. If we want to solve this issue, how about we use the president that's in office right now, because he's the art of the deal. He knows business, he knows how to negotiate, and he knows what free market can do. If they want to solve the health care crisis and actually take care of the American people, then use the business guy that's in office right now. Set away your hatred and your bias towards him, and realize he's the business guy that can maybe be able to help the American people solve this healthcare crisis and bring the free market back into working for the healthcare of the American
I might be
people.
for that. I think that therefore the government solving it, and we were just in Europe. I don't think it's a great idea.
That's why I said free market. Let's have the free market work, not government.
Senator, thank you for your time. We'll put a lot of these questions to Caroline Leavitt coming up next hour.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
He also noted the EPA, Department of the Interior, and the Department of Labor could face cuts due to the various agencies' mission creep into a lot of regulations that are quite harmful to the economy, that are quite harmful to just American families. EPA, over a decade or so, has mission creeped its jurisdiction into more and more regulatory affairs that just simply the EPA doesn't have under a statutory capacity, he said. They're regulating outside of the confines, the charge they were given by law, by Congress. So EPA is another one of those where that makes a lot of sense to cut a lot of the workforce there. Then, at HUD and Department of Labor, you have similar things. Stern said the administration likely is also eyeing agencies such as the National Science Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities, and certain aspects of the Department of Housing and Urban Development that are charged with running programs that write grants where there's an enormous amount of legal discretion on who gets the grant money. These grants are not serving some critical, or frankly, constitutional role, he said. Adding the grants often land in the hands of universities and promote left-wing ideology on topics, such as transgenderism and climate change. Trump said during various public remarks Tuesday, as the deadline clock began to run dry, the shutdown presented him with the opportunity for the administration to carry out layoffs, as part of a continued mission to slim down the federal government and snuff out overspending and fraud. Trump, however, repeatedly has stressed he does not support the shutdown, pinning blame on Democrats. We don't want it to shut down because we have the greatest period of time ever, Trump said from the Oval Office Tuesday. I tell you, we have $17 trillion being invested, so the last person that wants it shut down is us. Now, with that being said, we can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like, he continued.
There is zero good reason for them to vote to shut the government down right now. They are doing it for political reasons.
All we're asking is for the Trump administration and Republicans to come to the table and negotiate. Instead, he's acting like a mobster.
This is a failure of leadership. Republicans lead the House, Republicans lead the Senate, Republicans lead the White House.
The far left and the base really went crazy on poor Chuck Schumer. And so he changed his tune.
Live look at Washington, D.C. this afternoon as lawmakers point fingers over the government shutdown. The shutdown now rolling into a second day, 37 hours and counting, according to the White House clock. Hello, I'm John Roberts in Washington, and welcome to Friday Eve, as we like to call it around here.
Yep,
looking lovely in white today, Sandra.
Thank you very much, John. Good to be with you and kick off a new hour here. I'm Sandra Smith in New York, and this is America Reports. So Republicans say Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is more concerned with giving health care to illegal immigrants than keeping the government open. And a potential 2028 primary from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is looming above his head. But first, a quick flashback. Democrats giving illegal immigrants health care isn't a new policy position.
Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
That about says it. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum also slamming the Democratic Party for its, quote, intent to close our parks, stop U.S. energy production, and hinder our first responders.
The secretary will be joining us live here on America Reports in moments. But let's kick things off with Peter Doocy. He is live at the White House for us. Hello, Peter.
Sandra, good afternoon. Here at the White House, they call it the Schumer shutdown, but officials are candid about who they think is really pulling the strings.
But the reality here, and let's be honest about the politics, is that Chuck Schumer is terrified she's going to get a primary challenge from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The reason why the American people's government is shut down is because Chuck Schumer is listening to the far-left radicals in his own party because he's terrified of a primary challenge.
And the vice president is right about her clout because after AOC said this,
I saw some Republican members of Congress saying, oh, well, if we have this shutdown, it's because of AOC. Well, if that's the case, my office is open and you are free to walk in and negotiate with me directly.
Then Nancy Pelosi, widely accepted as the most influential congressional Democrat of an entire generation, couldn't believe her ears.
There was a thought from the Republicans that AOC is directing this, and she said that senators are welcome to go to her office directly. Is she driving that?
Why are you saying such a ridiculous thing?
I'm just quoting what AOC said. She said go to her office directly. Do you think there's any credibility to that?
She's not directing this. She's wonderful. She's a real team player and the rest of that. You started by saying Republicans saying that she's directing this. She is not. Hakeem Jeffries is.
President Trump and Russ Vought, the budget chief, are planning to meet at some point today to talk about Project 2025 style budget cuts, something that are easier to make during a shutdown. Sandra?
Okay, Peter Doocy setting it up for us. Thank you very much, Peter. John?
Lots to chew over here with the Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, who joins us now. You heard what the Vice President said there, Mr. Secretary, about this being driven by political pressure from the left and a potential primary challenge to Chuck Schumer in 2028. Jared Golden, Democrat from Maine, would seem to agree with the Vice President. He said the following, quote, this government shutdown is the result of hardball politics driven by demands far-left groups are making for Democratic Party leaders to put on a show of their opposition to President Trump. There's room and time to negotiate, but normal policy disagreements are no reason to subject our constituents to the continued harm of this shutdown. To you, is this about policy or is it about politics?
This is 100% politics, John and Sandra. The vice president said it clearly. The representative from Maine also nailed it when he was talking about this, because as Americans need to know, the House has already passed a continuing resolution. There are no changes to the federal budget on the line. If people want to negotiate, they could do that while the government's running as opposed to when it's shut down. And Americans need to know this Democrat shutdown, this Schumer shutdown, for an agency like Interior, where we've got tens of thousands of people across the country, we're now doing everything we can to try to keep our parks open. We can't use any appropriated funds during a time like this, so we've got to be very creative about legally finding ways to pay people and do that. Our first responders, firefighters, law enforcement, all the things that we're doing to keep the essential services going. This just distracts us from advancing and moving things forward for the American people. You would never run a business this way. This is 100% politics.
Spoken like a true businessman. Mr. Secretary, good to have you on the program. Here's Secretary Bessent. He went on CNBC earlier today. He is making the case that this is all about Schumer's poll numbers. Listen.
Chuck Schumer did the right thing in the spring and led the Senate to a clean CR. What's changed since then is it's his poll numbers. The president, Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, they're not negotiating with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. They're negotiating with Representative Ocasio-Cortez because she's nipping at his heels. And, so the American people are being held hostage by Chuck Schumer's poll numbers.
Well, as you are also making a similar case, will the American people just see right through this?
I hope that they do see right through this, and I hope they see through it quickly so that we can get back to work advancing the agenda that the American people voted for under President Trump, making so much progress on so many fronts. Because this can affect energy production. I mean, we're working to keeping permitting open on federal lands. When we're permitting timber, oil and gas, grazing lands, that's revenue that comes into the government. It's not all expense. There's also revenue. And when AOC is, trying to shut down the whole government, this is every American ends up paying for it in the end because this is hurting revenue. Because they'll come in and they'll say, no, we're going to reimburse everybody for their expenses, even though they're not working. But we have the potential for lost revenue here.
Now, Mr. Secretary, Republicans are saying that the Democrats shut down the government because they are making demands to give health care to illegal immigrants. Chuck Schumer says, oh, that's just not true. Listen to what he said.
When they say that undocumented immigrants are going to get this money, it's a lie, plain and simple.
All right, so let's put up on the screen here. This is page 57 of the Democrats' continuing resolution that they're proposing. This is section 2141. It's in ledge speak, so you probably can't even begin to understand it. But basically what it calls for is a repeal of restrictions in the big, beautiful bill that limited federal health care dollars for people who are lawfully present in the United States but don't have legal status. So if this was revoked, as the Democrats wanted to, it would give parolees, like hundreds of thousands of people admitted under the CHNV program or the CBP One app, access to health care. It would also restore full Medicaid funding for illegal migrants, illegal aliens who visit the emergency room. So do they want to give health care to illegal aliens or not?
Well, they absolutely do. And as I said, this is not about smart policy. It's not about the Republicans that care about all Americans, hardworking Americans. This is about the extreme policies that the left is trying to jam down. They're upset about what the extreme policies they didn't get into the one big beautiful bill. Now they're trying to use this leverage, and they're holding all the American people hostage for something that the Congress didn't vote for. Congress didn't pass that stuff for a reason back in July, and trying to use this now at this point. I mean, if they want these policies, then introduce a bill in Congress and see if it passes. But don't hold America hostage right now against doing the work that we have to do for the American people every single day. That's what we do. We serve the American people.
All right. So, Mr. Secretary, I wonder if you can quantify, as I circle back to something you just said a moment ago, because Secretary Bessent this morning suggested that as this goes on and the longer this goes on, he predicted that we could take a hit to our GDP. You just said a moment ago, suggested the longer this goes on, we could see lost revenue. Can you quantify that for us? I mean, we're about to have Austin Goolsbee on from the Chicago Federal Reserve. Mohammed El-Arian's coming on. The predictions are all over the place. But what say you? How big of a hit could we take to the American economy as this goes on?
Well, it is, Secretary Bessent is right. I mean, this creates a drag on government, and we'd like to, our team, the Trump administration, we'd like to get government as small as we can and let the private sector take over. But unwinding all of the overregulation that occurred during the Biden administration takes time. When we're not at work doing the work we're doing right now, it slows down the effort under President Trump. We're cutting a record amount of red tape. When the government shuts down, that slows it down. We're building more efficient government. We're taking costs out of government and putting that resources back in the private sector. And like I said earlier, when you take a look at it, 20% of the land in America is public lands managed by the federal government. Most of that land in Interior, Interior standalone has got the largest balance sheet in the world. We've got 700 million acres of subsurface, 500 million acres of surface, 2.5 billion of offshore. When our team members are not able to go to work to help manage that land, we're losing revenue, whether it's a timber lease, a grazing lease, a coal lease, oil and gas permitting. We're trying to keep all those doors open as best we can. But when they shut down the federal government, you're shutting down the business of America.
But President Trump appears to also see some opportunity here, Mr. Secretary. This is what he sent out today on Truth Social. I have a meeting today with Russ Vought, he of Project 2025 fame, the OMB director, to determine which of many Democrat agencies, most of which are a political scam, he recommends to be cut. and whether or not those cuts will be temporary or permanent. I can't believe the radical left Democrats gave me this unprecedented opportunity. They're not stupid people, so maybe this is their way of wanting to quietly and quickly make America great again, President Donald J. Trump. Is this going to be the pressure that causes Democrats to cave?
Well, it's the pressure, but it's also the truth. I mean, President Trump named his social media for a reason, calling them truths, because what he said is completely true. It is easier to make cuts during a time when the government is shut down. And any one of us that have been in these positions that have worked in the private sector can see the amount of inefficiency in government. There's so much that we can take out of government in terms of cost and still deliver great services. It's possible to have a smaller government and better services. We can do that. I mean, you take a look at the IT side of things. I mean, the technology that's running the federal government today is so ancient, so old, generations behind, and so it's costly. Every single team member that works for the federal government might spend 20% of their time on working on stuff that is that could be in the private sector, would already be automated. So President Trump and Russ Vought, I'm 100% behind their efforts. There's so many ways we can make it more efficient. If the Democrats are going to give us this chance, let's make sure we take advantage of that.
Hey, Mr. Secretary, I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Republicans have pinned the shutdown blame on Democrats, arguing they refused to fund the budget as an attempt to reinstate taxpayer-funded medical benefits for illegal immigrants. Democrats have countered that claim as a lie and cast blame for the shutdown on Republicans. A lot of good can come down from shutdowns, Trump added Tuesday. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things. But they want open borders. They want men playing in women's sports. They want transgender for everybody. They never stop. They don't learn. We won an election in a landslide. Trump's second administration has spotlighted the size of the federal government as bloated since Inauguration Day, including the president launching the Department of Government Efficiency to weed out potential fraud, overspending, and corruption, and offering federal employees voluntary buyouts in January to leave their posts before rolling out other RIF initiatives across various agencies.